If you own a house in the Houston area and you're trying to decide whether to sell it or rent it out, you're in the right place. Almost everyone who asks me this asks it the same way. They want to know which one makes more money. Fair question. It's just not the question that decides it. And in Texas specifically, there are two numbers buried inside this decision that most homeowners never find out about until it's too late to do anything about them. I'll show you both. I'll also give you one question that ends this debate in about 10 seconds for most people. It's a little uncomfortable, but it works. And later, I'll tell you about a homeowner who called us ready to sell his house to us, and I told him not to. I told him to rent it out instead. Quick word on why I'm the one telling you this. I'm Fred Pascal, president and founder of Hero Homebuyers, licensed Texas broker, former appraiser, close to 20 years helping Houston homeowners work through decisions just like this one. Here's the part that actually matters though. I own rental property myself, and my company buys houses. I've sat on both sides of this exact decision, which means I have no reason to push you in either direction. If renting is better for you, I'll just say so. So, you've probably already run some version of this in your head. You looked up what your house might sell for, then what a house like yours rents for, and you thought, the rent covers the payment, so renting it out is basically free money, and I get to keep the house. I've heard that sentence hundreds of times. I've also seen where it leads. You just compared two numbers that don't belong in the same sentence. A sale price happens once. Rent happens every single month. At least you hope. And the rent number you looked up is a gross number. Almost nobody keeps it. So let's run it with real Houston numbers. The median single-family home here sells for right around $340,000. The average single-family lease is running about $2,400 a month. Sounds decent. Now watch what happens to it. Vacancy first. Houston homes are taking about 40 days to lease right now, up from about 35 a year ago. Budget 1 month empty every year. There goes 8%. Maintenance and big ticket items are next. You got roof, AC, water heater, fence. Nobody replaces a water heater on a convenient schedule. Another 8 to 10% conservatively. Management. A manager runs 8 to 10% plus a leasing fee. And if you skip the manager, you didn't save that money. You just gave yourself a job. Hold that thought. Now, the fourth one. Nobody outside Texas is going to tell you about this one. The day that house stops being your primary residence, it stops being a homestead. You lose the $140,000 school district homestead exemption. You lose your city and county exemptions. And you lose the 10% annual cap on how much your appraised value is allowed to rise. That last one is where the real damage is. Now, if you've owned your house for a while, that cap is quietly holding your taxable value down. Take the homestead off and your assessed value snaps up to full market. I've watched Houston homeowners open a tax bill that jumped thousands of dollars in just 1 year because nobody warned them. So the honest version of your rent number isn't $2,400. Depending on your house, it's closer to $1,500 or $1,600, and that's before your mortgage payment if you have one. If you're carrying a mortgage from the last few years, please run that number. A lot of Houston houses do not cash flow right now, and people tend to find that out at about month 7. And hey, if this is more useful than what you've been finding, subscribing helps me keep making these for Houston homeowners. And stay with me because the most expensive part of this decision hasn't even come up yet, and it never shows up on a monthly spreadsheet from anywhere. Now, let me tell you about a homeowner I'll call David. David is a composite built out of a dozen or so conversations over the years, so no real person's details are in here, but the shape of it is exactly right. David got transferred to Dallas. He owned a house in Cypress about 9 years, and he loved that house. And he told me, I'm just going to rent it for a year, keep my options open. That sentence, I'm just going to rent it for a year, is the most common sentence in this entire topic. And notice, it doesn't sound like a decision. It sounds like postponing one. That's what makes it dangerous. Year 1 was fine. Year 2, the tenant left in March, the house sat 6 weeks, and while it was empty, the AC died. Year 3, new tenant, slower payer, and David is 240 miles away managing a house he can't see. Then he called me on a Tuesday night about a water leak, and he said something I've never forgotten to this day. He said, "Fred, I don't even like this house anymore." 9 years of his life in that house, kids' pencil marks on a door frame, and it had turned into a thing that had called him at night. The lesson isn't that renting is bad. I own rentals. The lesson is that David never decided to become a landlord. He drifted into it. And a decision you drift into is a decision somebody else is making for you. So, how do you decide on purpose? When a homeowner sits down with me, this is roughly the order. 3 questions. Question number 1, does it actually cash flow using the honest numbers instead of the gross rent? If the answer is no, you're not investing, you're subsidizing. That can still be the right call. You just need to know you're doing it and know how long you can afford to. Question number 2, this is the one I promised you. If you did not already own this house and it came across your desk today at today's price, at today's rent, at today's tax bill with no homestead exemption, would you buy it as a rental? Sit with that one for a second. Most people, when they're honest, they say no. And that answer matters because if you wouldn't buy it as an investment today, you're not keeping an investment. You're keeping a memory with a mortgage on it. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you know that's the choice you're making. Memories sometimes have carrying costs. Question 3, do you want the job? Not do you want the income, do you want the job? A rental house is not passive income. It's a small business, and if you don't hire a manager, you just hired yourself. Screening, turnover, repairs, somebody else living in a house you have feelings about. Some people genuinely enjoy that. Others find out in month 4 that it's costing them something the math never showed. 3 yeses, rent it. 2 out of 3, be careful and know which one you're overriding. 1 or none, sell it and don't feel guilty about it, never look back. Now, here's the second number I promised you, and this is the one I want you to hear. When you sell a house you've lived in, federal law lets you exclude a large chunk of your profit from capital gains tax. $250,000 if you're single, $500,000 if you're married filing jointly. To qualify, you generally need to have lived in the house as your main home for 2 of the last 5 years before you sell. 2 of the last 5, sit with that. It means the moment you move out and rent it, a clock starts. You get roughly 3 years of renting before those 2 years of living there fall outside the 5-year window. Sell inside the window and your exclusion is generally intact. Miss it and you can owe capital gains tax on appreciation you would have kept completely tax-free. In Houston, where a lot of long-time owners are sitting on $200,000 or $300,000 of gain, that's not a rounding error. That's a 5-figure tax bill created by a delay. Now, I'm not your CPA, and this is exactly the kind of thing you should run past one before you decide, not after. But here's the takeaway. Renting for a year to see how it goes is a legitimate strategy. It just comes with an expiration date, and most homeowners never learn it exists until they're on the wrong side of it. So, the man I mentioned at the start, also a composite, same as David. I'll call him Ray. 68, retired, wife had passed 2 years earlier, paid off house in Clear Lake. He called us because he wanted to move to Georgia to be near his daughter and the grandkids, and he wanted a clean, fast sell. We could have done that deal, but 3 things came up. The house was paid off, so no mortgage was eating the rent. He was moving in with the family for the first year, so he didn't need the proceeds to buy anything. And what he actually needed was monthly income because his fixed income was tight and it worried him. That house rented for about $2,100 a month with no mortgage against it. Even after the tax bill went up without the homestead exemption and insurance and a manager taking their cut, that was real money every month. It was the exact thing he was short on. So I told him not to sell to us. Hire a property manager, keep the house for now, and put the 3-year clock on the calendar so he could make a clean decision before it ran out. With his CPA and on purpose. About 8 months in, he called me. Plumbing problem. Here's the difference between Ray and David. Ray's manager had already handled it. Ray was calling to tell me about it, not to ask me what to do. That's the whole thing. It was never renting versus selling. It was deciding versus drifting. So back to where we started. Which one makes more money? My honest answer after 20 years of watching this play out is that over a long enough timeline, keeping a house in Houston usually does make more money, if you do it right, if nothing goes badly wrong, and if you're still willing to be a landlord in year 6. That's 3 ifs. And people don't get hurt on the decision because they picked wrong. They get hurt because they never priced the ifs. So here's the better question, and it's the one I ask myself. 5 years from now, do I want to be responsible for this house? That's the real choice. Not an asset, a responsibility. And the house will be fine either way. It doesn't know you love it. Your life is the thing that has to absorb the decision. The goal was never to squeeze the last dollar out of this house. The goal is for this house to make your life lighter instead of heavier. If you're weighing your options and want straight answers with zero pressure, book a free consultation call. The link's below. We'll walk through everything, even if the best move isn't selling to us. Ray's call ran about 20 minutes and ended with me telling him to keep the house. That's a pretty normal outcome around here. We work with homeowners across the Houston area, so if that's you, the call is free and there's nothing to sign or no obligation. If you're leaning towards selling, there's one thing to settle before you spend $1. Most people assume they have to fix the house up first. Usually they don't. And some of those repairs can cost more than they'll ever see in a return. I made a video on which ones actually pay off and which ones don't. It's right here. And if your house needs work, watch that one first. I'm Fred Pascal with Hero Home Buyers. Thank you for watching. Good day and God bless.